Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Darden, and I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today here on Navy Sports Central. I'm your host, and this is the official podcast of the Navy Sports Nation, where we take a deeper dive into Navy sports. In this episode, we'll be joined by a very special guest who has over 3 decades of experience working in college athletics. She's going to provide us with some insight on a couple of her key roles, as well as give us her perspective on recruiting and the college transfer portal. And of course, we'll have our sports update, question of the day, and mid-watch segments as well. So stick around. We'll get going as soon as we come back. Okay, here we go with our 8th show of the calendar year and our 30th overall. For any new listeners out there, I really appreciate you checking us out. And if you've heard us before, welcome back. Either way, thanks for making us part of your day. Okay, we're going to kick off our sports update by letting you know how the gymnastics teams finished up. Coach Kip Simons had 9 athletes make it through the NCAA qualifying meet to the finals, and from there, the goal was to finish in the top 8 in their respective event to earn All-America status. Josh Williams on the rings and Giovanni Gambatese, who competed in the high bar, just barely got edged out. Williams was less than 1/10 of a point out of the number 8 spot, while Gambatese was within a quarter point of finishing in a tie for 7th. Overall, the Mids had a pretty good year. Coach Simons and his staff did a great job getting the team ready for each competition, and it really paid off. They won 4 dual meets, including the Star Meet over Army, and they also won this year's All-Academy Championship. I'll go ahead and include a link to the article recapping the NCAA so you can see how the rest of the athletes on the gymnastics team did. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at the baseball team. They've had a bit of an up-and-down year after losing pitcher Charlie Connolly to graduation. The Mids have been hanging around the 500 mark all season long, and they are currently 17-19, and their record in the Patriot League is 8-10, which is good enough for 4th place. The Mids' leading hitter is Christian Policelli. He is batting .346 with a couple of home runs. He's also second on the team in RBIs with 26 and first in stolen bases with 10. Pitching-wise, Nolan Jorgensen is third on the team with over 34 innings pitched. He also has a 3-1 record and an impressive 1.83 earned run average. The Mids head to West Point looking to pick up their 2nd straight star, and they're definitely hitting the ball more consistently now. Earlier in the season, Army not only swept the doubleheader, but they totally shut down Navy's bats, winning both games 7-0 and 9-0. Now, I don't see that happening again, but it's going to take an all-out effort for the Mids to win 2 out of 3 on the road. And finally, we're going to finish up with women's tennis. They go into the Patriot League Championship this weekend as the number 2 seed behind Boston University. The Mids are currently 21-5. Their only loss in league play actually was to the Terriers this past weekend. In that match, the Mids won the doubles point, but they could only manage 1 point in the singles, unfortunately. But the number 3 and the number 5 singles matches were pretty close, though. So if they happen to run into the Terriers again, which would only be in the finals, that could go in a different direction. The Mids do face Lehigh on Friday in the quarterfinals. They handled them easily about 4 weeks ago, so we'll see how things go. But I do like their chances getting through to the next round. Okay, that does it for the sports update, and I know that was kind of a quick one, but I am really looking forward to getting into this deep dive segment, so please don't go anywhere. We are just getting started, and you do not want to miss this. All right, now it's time for our deep dive segment. And if you've ever been curious as to how things work in the athletics department at a Division I school, you are exactly in the right place. Our guest today has over 30 years experience in college athletics. In fact, she has what I consider to be the unique experience of getting a Division I college football program up and running from scratch. And she is here with us to share her perspective on the current state of college athletics, specifically as it relates to recruiting and the college transfer portal. So with that, I'm very happy to welcome Mary McElroy from the class of '87 to the Navy Sports Central podcast. Mary, thank you so much for being with us here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Glad to be here, Carl.
Hey, listen, before we get going, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked all my guests who went to the academy, and that is, how did you first hear about it, and what motivated you to apply for an appointment?
Honestly, I saw some people with their picture in the newspaper, my local newspaper, because they had appointments to the academies. And so I read the article and I realized that I was fairly close to the top of my class. And I played 3 sports in high school. So I said, hey, and my parents didn't have money to send me to college. So I decided to look into it. and I applied. And unfortunately for me, 4 other guys in my high school graduating class had beat me to the appointments.
Oh, wow.
I ended up going to NAPS for a year before I came to the academy. And actually, there are 6 of us from our 1982 class at Great Mills High School who have graduated from the Naval Academy.
Is that right?
And then a 7th went to the Coast Guard Academy. So yeah, so we are that class was pretty incredible.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, it's unusual even to have 2 from the same
Right.
class go to the same service academy. So to have that many is pretty incredible.
Yes. And pretty diverse too. We had me as a Black female, we had 2 Black males and 3 white males. We had sons of Marine veterans, sons of enlisted, and then a son of a Navy career officer. So it was great.
Okay. All right, cool. Now, you mentioned you played 3 sports there.
Yes.
Obviously, basketball is one of them because that's how I got to know that your background and everything. What else did you play?
I played basketball, softball, and volleyball. And actually, softball is my first sport and my one that I'm most good at. And I played since 2nd grade.
Right. Okay. So when you went to Navy, was your intent to play one or all of those sports, or did you just kind of say, okay, well, I'll just kind of feel things out, and if I feel comfortable, I'll go out for one of the sports or more than one?
Yes, it was. I got in on academics. I was not recruited at all for any of the sports. And when I got there, I was used to playing volleyball in the fall. So during plebe summer, I went and played volleyball, and somehow the coach found out that I wanted to play basketball, and so he got word to me that if I wanted to play basketball, I probably should be over playing basketball during plebe summer. So I gave up volleyball to go ahead and get in shape for basketball, and ended up making the team. Made the team 3 times, and then played softball for 3 years. I did not play my plebe year because I tore some cartilage in my knee during plebe year. And so I didn't get to play softball as a plebe, but I played softball for 3 years and was the team captain.
Oh, okay.
During first year. So yeah, it was awesome, but I loved it. But never played volleyball ever at the academy, not even recreationally.
Oh, wow. So basketball wise, and again, I remember your name first popped up to me. And by the way, for the folks that are listening, Mary and I were actually in the same company at the academy. I was a senior when she came in for her plebe year. But and I knew that she was an athlete, but I wasn't sure exactly which sports. And then when I was talking with Becky Lewis back in December, she's the one who brought up Mary's name again. And I said, wait a minute, I remember. So let's talk a little bit about your basketball time. What was just like your most memorable experience about playing on that team?
Oh my gosh, playing with people like Becky. And Lori Reynolds, who we had no idea at the time she would go on to be a 3-star general in the Marines, which is pretty awesome. And then just getting to play for Coach Smalley. He was an incredible man that taught us so many things about life, about the game of basketball. He taught us the game of basketball rather than just coaching us through each game. And so it allowed us to be able to respond to whatever circumstances we encountered. And then it has, to this day, colored the way that I watch the game.
Right. And we can talk about that more in a second. And because, I don't know if you heard the conversation I had with Becky, but I love watching basketball and just kind of breaking it down. And, I'm kind of like semi-retired now, but, and then I do some substitute teaching at a local junior high school where my kids went. And I go to watch those games just because I like being around that environment and just watching these kids develop. But you bring up a good point with Coach Smalley, and that is he taught you the game of basketball, right? And you see a lot of coaches, once they get to that collegiate level, they are basically, like you were saying, just basically coaching games. And then player development may wind up taking a back seat. Can you speak to that when it comes to player development as it relates to college basketball versus the high school level and so forth? It doesn't stop once you get into college, does it?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, the game is slightly different in college than high school. In fact, when we played in college, we were playing halves. But now the women play quarters again now, and I like that much better. But it's just the speed of the game, as you would expect, is a little bit more as well. But yeah, it's just the strategies that coaches employ get a little bit more complicated. But yeah, if your coach teaches you the game, again, you can respond to the various situations. You can determine what kind of offense they're playing, and you can slide around on the defense a little bit better to be able to compensate for the gaps that might be developing in your defense. If you're playing a zone or something like that, you might want to move to man-to-man. But then you also need to know time and situation. I mean, a lot of times, like this year, the NC State game against UConn, where they were playing for the last Final Four spot.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was not the last one, but one of the Final Four spots. And I was excited for NC State. They had 28 seconds left on the clock in regulation. I was like, okay, good. We're going to win.
Yeah.
We got this. We got this. Yes, they had the ball. They had 28 seconds, plenty of time. The game was tied. They just needed to get 1 point.
Right.
So in any case, and then they started doing the hold the ball drill. And I got nervous as the clock ticked down below 20, then below, 15. And I'm like, all right, move toward the basket. You got to get closer to the basket. And it just astounded me that they weren't able to get a shot off and ended up going to overtime. And UConn had the momentum. And so Paige Beckers, I don't know how she did it, but single-handedly got them the victory. So anyway, I digress a little bit. But that's how I watch the game anymore. Right. So it's pretty awesome. But it was a great game. That was by far one of the best games I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, no doubt.
We just came out on the losing end.
Right. Okay, so going back to your time at the academy, you basically played the softball all those 3 years, the last 3 years, I think, and then basketball as well. Right. Now it's senior year and you're coming up on service selection. How did you come to that decision? And talk a little bit about how your career went as far as, being on active duty.
Sure. Well, growing up in a disciplined household, I was fine going Navy or Marine Corps. I was thinking I was going Navy after going to NAPS and then being in the Navy for 5 years. But fortunately for me, I met my future husband while I was at the academy. And he was in the class of 86, and he selected Marine Corps so he could fly because there were no more pilot billets left in the Navy offerings. And so he selected Marine Corps. So that meant I selected Marine Corps so I could live with him. So I joke around that I selected Marine Corps so I could live with my husband, but it would make it easier for me to be able to follow him around to, have a dual career.
Right.
So that's why I chose Marine Corps, and they got some great uniforms too. So
yeah, that's true. I will not deny them that. And I'll also say that Marines in general do the best job of marketing themselves as a service.
Yes.
I mean, I've seen the most inspirational billboards just driving up and down the highway sometimes, So props to the Marine Corps for being able to do that.
Right. And the other thing, Gunnery Sergeant Navglasky, our drill instructor up at NAPS, had planted a seed in my head when I was a Napster that the Marine Corps was a good service for women because they respected the rank. And I found that to be true. I had a good experience in the Marines.
Understood. Okay, cool. So what were some of the jobs that you did when you were in the Marine Corps?
I selected Supply Corps. Again, that would be... My husband was a pilot, so that would make it easier for me to be stationed at any naval or any base, any Marine Corps base. And then you had to pick a secondary MOS, and I picked, public administration, basically. Again, so that whichever one I ended up with, it would be flexible. Ended up being stationed at Cherry Point was my first duty station, and then I got an assignment back to supply school as an instructor. Okay. And then I ended up getting off active duty after 5 years. So I had a pretty short stint.
Okay. So that would have finished you up in 92. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I actually got off active duty the following year because I took an extra couple of years to be an instructor down at Pensacola flying helicopters. Yeah. Okay. So now you're off active duty and you wind up back at the academy. So can you talk a little bit about that story?
Yeah, that was kind of wild. My husband ended up getting stationed at the academy. I had actually been interviewing for private sector jobs and was headed for a job with Bristol Myers Squibb, and they were going to pay for my MBA, and they were going to send me to Evansville, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had a 2-year-old son at the time, Darren, our oldest, and then Terry got orders to the Naval Academy, and I was like, okay, am I going to take the baby and go to Evansville by myself, or should we just go with you to the academy? And so we decided that I would just go with him to the academy. I figured I'd find something in Baltimore or DC and be able to commute from Annapolis.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, we had stayed in touch with Coach Smalley, and every time I was in town, I would stop by to say hello, and I would reach out to him. And so on this particular trip, I went by his office and told him that we were headed back to the academy. And he told me about this position that was coming open in the athletics department and encouraged me to apply. So I did, and ended up getting a job right there at Navy in athletics, working for him and being his assistant compliance coordinator. And this was when the NCAA manual it doubled in thickness, and so lots of rules to enforce. And so I just dove in and learned it and decided to embark upon that career. So it was pretty interesting.
All right. So compliance, and
yes,
and we were talking earlier how when I was working with Johnson & Johnson, I worked in the sales training department after doing a few years in sales, and I had to train basically an entire hospital sales force of about 100 reps across the country and their managers.
Wow.
So as you can imagine, with healthcare, compliance is a really big deal because you're dealing with people's lives, literally, and you don't want to be getting caught with any kind of false advertising or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So our strategy with compliance when we were developing training materials and sales materials was to just bring in compliance from the very beginning and actually have them as partners as we're developing this stuff, so they can kind of say, okay, that's good. This one you need to reword, that sort of thing. And that way we weren't doing the work twice, essentially. Can you talk a little bit about how your relationship was with the coaches and so forth, and how you built that up?
Sure. That was really interesting how you attacked it with your healthcare background, because I attacked it very similarly at Navy. I was single-handedly, although I was the assistant compliance coordinator, I think in a year he promoted me to compliance coordinator. So basically I was responsible single-handedly for, at the time, I think it was 29 varsity sports that Navy had. So I figured that I had to get creative and come up with something. I didn't even have an assistant. And so I developed this thing called the daily compliance item, whereby I would make up a humorous scenario and pose a question about NCAA compliance, and then give the answer the next day. So I would say, Jenny Jumpshot is coming to Navy for an official visit. Can she bring her parents and her little brother? And how much of their expenses which of the family members' expenses can Navy pick up? And that would be the question. And then the next day I'd give the answer, and then I'd give another question.
Okay.
And so there's a recruiting test that coaches have to take every year to be able to recruit off campus. And so this daily compliance item served a dual purpose of educating them on the rules and forcing them to open the book to find out what rule allowed them to do whatever I was asking that they could do. And then it would get them ready for this test at the end of the year. So they usually would take that in the summer. And so it was a humorous way to educate them about the rules. And then it was an innocuous way to educate them about the rules. The other thing that I did was I would go around to their offices and just visit with them from time to time, similarly to what you did, and talking about, okay, why don't you tell me what you're thinking you want to do? And then we can figure out together a legal way that you can do that, rather than you going off in a direction that you think is appropriate and then having me play the police after the fact. So
right.
I always joke that at one point in my life, I wanted to be a lawyer. Another part, I wanted to be a teacher. And this job in compliance allowed me to kind of be a lawyer and a teacher, and very rarely a police officer too.
That's pretty good. And by the way, going back to that question you posed, the answer to me Kind of might be obvious, but I'm not 100% certain. So what's the answer to that question?
Oh, sorry. I'm leaving you hanging. So Navy could pick up the expenses of the parents.
Oh, okay.
But not the sibling.
Got it.
So and yes, because it's an official visit, that's the reason that they could pick them up. If it was an unofficial visit, and right now they're allowed 5 official visits total in their time of recruitment, and they're only allowed to take them their senior year in high school. But the parents have to pick up the cost of the siblings.
Got it. Now, what constitutes an official visit versus an unofficial visit?
That's one where the institution that is recruiting you can pay for you to come visit them and check them out.
Oh, got it.
An unofficial visit, you can make an unofficial visit. That's when you decide to come to the campus on your own. You pick up all your expenses, and you can do any number of those.
Okay.
The official visits are limited to 5, and unofficial, you can do it. Basically, if you think about it, if I'm recruiting the institution, I can go as many times as I want. I can spend as much money as I want to check out that institution. But if that institution wants me, they can only spend X amount of dollars on me, and I can only come once to their campus.
Got it. Okay.
At their expense.
All right. Very good. So now, how long were you at the academy in that role?
I ended up being there 3 years in that role. And then I went over to the Alumni Association for 1 year as Director of Alumni Services.
All right. Good enough. So from there, your path in college athletics has been kind of established at that point. Can you just kind of share a little bit about each of your stops along the way and what you took away from them? If there's one really good takeaway you had from any one or all of them, and if you could share those as well.
Interestingly enough, I've tried to get out of college athletics a couple of times, but it's I don't know. It's like quicksand. I can't get out. But I've gotten out, but I've ended up coming back into it because I just enjoy it so much. But
right.
But after I left Navy and left Annapolis, I actually moved to Atlanta and worked a little bit, and then I went to Georgia Tech to get my master's, and I had resisted getting an MBA, but then I ended up getting one because I figured it was the most flexible. But while I was getting my MBA, I was going full time, and I finished my first year. I was coming to the end of my first year of 2-year program, and we were assigned, or I was invited to join a team that was helping the athletic department frame their strategic plan. And so I joined the team, and we went over to introduce ourselves to the athletic director. And right there in front of everybody, he started recruiting me. And it's like, Mary, because we had to explain what we had done and what made us a valuable member of this team. And I said, I worked in compliance at the Naval Academy. He goes, really? Who'd you work for? And I said, Jack Lingle. And he goes, Jack Lingle. Wow. And how many programs were there? I said, 29. He goes, you were, and I said, I was single-handedly ran their compliance department. And he said, you did compliance single-handedly for Jack Lingle for 29 sports. You must be really good. And he goes, I want you to come work for me. And I'm like, I didn't come to Georgia Tech to get my MBA to go back into college athletics. And he goes, well, you come work for me. And I'll pay for the second year of your MBA. And then he goes, the college athletics door doesn't swing open very often. You come work for me. You can always go to corporate America later. I'll pay for the second year of your degree. And then you can go to corporate America whenever you feel ready later on. So I did. I'm not right there. I didn't agree to it right then and there. I agreed to come meet him, come talk to him about it. And I ended up going to work for him and stayed there 6 years and did very well, and ended up from there getting there. So something I took from Georgia Tech was I was in charge of men's basketball. I was a sport administrator for men's basketball when they made their championship run in 2004. I don't say Final Four run. I always say they played for the championship. They didn't just get to the Final Four. They got to the championship game. And we ended up losing by 9 points to UConn, but that was fun. And then I moved over to Georgia State, where I became the athletic director at Georgia State, where I was the second Black female in history to be an athletic director at a Division I program that was not an HBCU.
Oh, awesome.
So did some great things over there. The most notable was that I started a football team from scratch and was able to hire Bill Curry as the first football coach.
How about that?
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
it was really pretty exciting stuff. So, but I did a lot of hard work in 3.5 years and put them on the map athletically and improved the basketball program as well. But then they ended up leaving there. They decided they wanted to go into a different direction. I always joke that, I finished the list that they had for me, and I should have taken 10 years to finish it instead of 3.5 years. And then I'd still be there. But,
serves you right for being so efficient, huh?
Exactly. It's like he brought me there to do some tests, and I was like, aye, sir, got right to work and check. Oh, got that done. And so anyway, I ended up moving on from there, and I made a couple of other stops and then ended up at Temple University in 2015. So skip ahead a few years. And so I was there because they had a fairly inexperienced guy in the role. Pat Kraft had been the deputy athletic director before that, and he had about 5 more years of experience. But they recruited me up there to come help him run the athletic department while he got up to speed as an athletic director, and ended up working great with him. Loved it. Didn't really like the cold of Philadelphia, but loved the opportunity there. And so that was my first football game ever as a Temple staff member. Temple beat Penn State.
Oh, wow.
First time in 78 years. And so, in Philly. So it was pretty exciting stuff, but we did some great things there, and ended up getting this position that I'm in now, the Senior Associate Commissioner for Women's Basketball at the ACC. Every stop where I have served in athletics, I have worked with women's basketball. So it was really intriguing for me to even apply for this opportunity, but was super excited to get it, and I'm really enjoying it.
All right, good. So let's speak to that a little bit.
Sure.
What's your daily routine like? And I'm thinking about, you must have just been swamped in February and March with the tournament and everything, but I'm just kind of curious to find out, how does that workload compare to the beginning of the year? Is it pretty constant the whole time? That sort of thing.
No, there are ebbs and flows. The beginning of the year, well, yeah, it's kind of all spread out. But so let me break it down into the main tasks that I focus on. So one of the main tasks is developing the schedule each year. So we have 15 teams in the ACC, and they play an 18-game regionalized schedule. So we have a North region, a Central, and a Southern region. And so there are 5 teams in each region. So each team plays the other 4 teams in their region twice. They play them home and away, and they play everybody in the other 2 regions once.
Got it. So
that's where we account for 18 teams or 18 games. And so putting together that schedule on an annual basis and making sure it's fair and balanced is one major task that we do. And we try to anticipate which teams are going to be the best teams. And then we watch out for, me and my number 2 are the ones that work on the schedule. And so we watch out for these runs where they match up against those other teams. And we try to spread out those runs so they're not, what we call them is gauntlets, that they're not facing multiple gauntlets or just horrible gauntlets where they got Louisville, NC State, and Georgia Tech all back to back.
Right.
And on the road. So we balance the number of road games. We look at the gauntlets. We also look at their Thursday night games because the ACC is very focused on academic achievement. And so we look for where they're traveling to on Thursday and make sure they can get back for class on Friday, et cetera. And then we also look at finishing up the season, that they finish up on a Sunday so that they can do senior day. And then if they don't get a Sunday for the very last game of the season, we look to make sure that they get a Sunday game the previous week at home.
Wow.
So things like that. Also, we manage the ACC women's basketball tournament at the end of the season every year. So that's our championship. again, all 15 teams qualify for the championship. That's a 5-day, I think it's 14 game tournament. So it's a brutal schedule. So we go 3 games, 4 games, 4 games, 2 games, 1 game. But it's fun. It's so exciting. And this year was amazing. It was so competitive. And then the other thing is during the season, we manage the execution of the schedule and making sure that we're monitoring the TV exposures. I also am the liaison for ESPN, the ACC network, and our Raycom television partners to make sure that we get games on TV, we get, a balanced number of games, and that, we look out for the exposures, the national and regional exposures for our respective teams. And then I travel to various games to just show the flag and show support for the teams. And then postseason, we follow our teams through the NCAA as well. So it's a lot of fun, a lot of work, but a lot of fun. So, but I don't mind it.
Yeah, I can imagine. That sounds like well, wait, they're actually paying you to do all that stuff. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
now, real quick
I pinch myself sometimes too.
Right. Now, real quick before we move on to that, the whole scheduling piece was really interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of software or anything that kind of helps you out there, or is it just kind of like you guys? It's like this big, like the big whiteboard or whatever, and you just start moving pieces around and stuff like that to see what fits.
Well, thankfully at Georgia Tech, I had a class called Operations Research. No, just kidding. It does help having had that Operations Research class at Georgia Tech in my master's. In fact, one of my last classes that I took was an Operations Research class on steroids, where it was called Deterministic Optimization, a 30 letters in that. But anyway, I digress. But we actually have a consultant that we work with, and that we give him parameters as to what we're looking for. And he plugs it into his optimization program, and he spits out feasible schedules for us. And then we evaluate them for what we're looking for in terms of spreading out those gauntlets, getting the Thursday nights spread out and the Sundays especially.
All right.
So yeah, so you anticipated correctly that it's a tough thing to do, and we go through. It depends on what year it is and how good our teams are, how many versions of the schedule we have to go through. My first year, we got to like version 12 before we found a workable, feasible and acceptable solution. Second year, I think we did it in 5. Last year, it took 8. So it'll be interesting to see how many we got this year. We had 6 top 20 ranked teams to begin the season with last year. So that's why it took going through it a few more times, because we had to spread out those gauntlets.
Right. Understood. Okay. So now the NCAA tournaments are over. Again, we're about 2 weeks removed from that. And we're starting to see some of the movement that comes with the end of the season as it relates to the transfer portal, right? So I was wondering if you can kind of briefly explain. There's a lot of folks who hear that term, and even I had to kind of educate myself on it about a year and a half ago, just to kind of get a better understanding. And I'm not claiming to be any expert on it by any stretch of the imagination. So I was wondering if you could kind of briefly explain what the purpose of that portal is and how different things are now than there were before as it relates to college athletics.
Yes. So it used to be that if you I'm going to speak Division I only.
Right.
And if you transferred from one college to another, transfer into a Division I college, let's say, just go from that aspect. You transfer into a Division I program, say it's Navy. You come to the Naval Academy, you have to sit a year before you can compete for Navy. Didn't matter where you came from. It's about where you came into. And so you had to sit a year of residence. And then before you left your previous institution, you needed to have permission from your institution, usually the athletic director and by extension your coach. But the athletic director would write a letter, or compliance person would write a letter on behalf of the athletic director to the other athletic director, giving that institution permission to speak to this student athlete.
Got it.
And so sometimes schools wouldn't give permission to speak to a particular school. Sometimes I would write a letter, say, when I was at Georgia Tech, I would say, you could speak to any institution but Georgia, which was the arch rival. And so student athletes would sometimes, balk against that. And then if you didn't have permission to speak to that school, you could not get financial aid from them. So that permission, it mattered. And so now with the portal, you don't have to have permission. You can just go and put your name into this portal. And then the transfer rules, it didn't happen concurrently, but in time before the portal became into effect, where the NCAA changed the rules to remove the residence requirement. Now, conferences used to also have conference rules, like the ACC had a conference transfer rule that if you transferred intra-conference within the ACC, you couldn't play for 2 years and you couldn't get financial aid the first year. So all that went away. The conferences ended up rescinding their respective rules, and then the NCAA overall removed the residence requirement for the transfer. So it's the student athletes now have the freedom to leave when they want and go where they want without being hindered by their current institution.
Right. Now, right before we jumped on together, we were kind of, talking a little bit about the whole environment as it relates to the college transfer portal. And you referred to it as it basically just being a little bit of a Wild Wild West atmosphere, which is fairly accurate based on what I've seen. And I don't know that there's really a good answer to this question, but because I wanted to ask you if there was one change you could make to kind of make the process go more smoothly, what would it be? But my feeling is, as I'm asking this question, it's probably more than one thing that might need to be done. But maybe speak to like one or two that you think, okay, if we can somehow figure out a way to agree on this, then this process will be even better.
Yeah. I mean, we have been trying from the beginning to have a national standard, because the thing that's the most challenging is that the standard varies from state to state. Some do not have, I'm talking NIL. Transfer portal is a standard, but what we would like to see is a cutoff date where the student athletes have to declare that they want to transfer by a certain date. They, again, don't have to have permission up front, but they got to have a cutoff date. The challenge being that with no cutoff date, they can wait until the coach has finished recruiting for the year and then decide that, I want to go. And the unfortunate thing for the coach is it's already unfortunate that they don't know from year to year who's going to be on their team the next year. But now they might find out at the last minute, after they've already issued all their scholarship offers for the upcoming year, that I've decided I'm not coming back. Or the other way around, I said I'm not coming back, and then I changed my mind and stay. Right. And so by establishing a cutoff, I think that would help both sides to know where things would stand. Some student athletes are finding out that the portal is not as forgiving as they thought. The grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence, and that portal, going into that portal, doesn't mean you're going to come out at another institution that you're going to be happy with.
That's exactly right.
If you come out with another institution at all, because some coaches they might consider the circumstances under which you entered the portal and feel that it's not worth taking a chance on you. So, so it's been interesting. So.
Yeah, I can imagine. And to your point, I mean, Navy, speaking specifically to football, Navy's had a handful of guys go that transfer portal route over the last three or 4 years. And the only one that I know of that has really benefited from it has been Jacob Springer. Yeah. He went to Mississippi State and ended up really having an impact there, especially I looked at his stats this past year, was his senior year, and he did really, really well. But the rest of them have just kind of disappeared. I don't know where they are. I know that Jamel Carruthers, I think, ended up at Western Kentucky, but I think he had like one carry for like 9 yards the entire year. So I see exactly what you're saying there.
I mean, there's a reason they come to the Naval Academy. I mean, there's, it's a fit for them. And so, I mean, I'm encouraged by the fact that, student athletes who choose to go to the Naval Academy, they're going for a different purpose. They're
Right.
not, sports is not their primary focus. First of all, they know they have a military obligation on the backside, and they embrace that. And then, many of them, we have good athletes, but they're not necessarily the blue chip Division I athletes. And so, but they have that heart. And so we are very competitive. Our teams are outstanding and they're very, very competitive. And we do have a lot of blue chips, but some aren't. And some just become really good student athletes while they're at the Naval Academy. So, I just encourage the mids to think long and hard before they would think about going elsewhere and think about all the benefits that they get. That leadership training and those things. Certainly we all get them from participating in college athletics, but that Navy experience is second to none.
Yeah. Well said. Now, just kind of wrapping up our discussion around the portal and recruiting and so forth. As you probably know, Navy actually hired a new director of recruiting this past year. It was actually just a few months ago. I would say within a month after the football season ended. And his name is Danny Payne. He actually did spend some time up at Army as well. But I think he came from Georgia Southern. So when Coach Niumatalolo was commenting on the hire, he mentioned this. He said, "Recruiting is the lifeblood of any program. The name of the game today in college football recruiting is social media innovation, creativity and communication, and standalone branding." And I'm wondering, in your capacity, working on the women's basketball side, and with your experience having been in athletic directors' offices before, if you could kind of elaborate on that a little bit, especially when you see the impact of social media on college sports these days. What's a good example of using social media the right way, and maybe talk about some areas that you may want to stay away from here?
Well, I would say, it's the way that this generation communicates. I don't think that they communicate any way more substantially than social media. My sons are 29 and 32 now, but they still are, if I want to communicate with them, I'm usually texting them or I'm sending some kind of Twitter notification. I don't do Snapchat, but they're up on all of it. TikTok, Snapchat. I don't even know how they keep up, but
right.
But you need to have a presence in all of those areas. Facebook, even, you need to have a Facebook presence too, because you also, in the recruiting process, you end up recruiting the parents too. So,
got it.
And most people in my generation, we're more on Facebook than we are the Twitter, Snapchat, and TikTok. But there's some out there that get on those as well. But you gotta be slick. I'm not slick, but it needs to be, glossy. It needs to catch the eye for them, because if it's amateurish, they pick up on that. And so you need to make sure that you make a concerted effort to be effective in what the messaging is that you're putting out and the delivery of those messages. And then you need to do it fairly frequently. You got to do it a couple times a week. Because they're looking for fresh content. They don't want to just, you just put something out there once a month. It gets stale in their mind, and it conveys that you might not be as interested in them as they would want you to be interested in them. So that you have to do. What you shouldn't do is you got to watch out what kind of enticements or offers you put out there, because you still can't entice students to come to your school or student athletes to come to your school by making offers of goods or services. So you just got to watch out for that. And then one other thing that you might want to do that's effective is highlighting things that they have done that you're proud of, and then highlighting things that midshipmen are accomplishing that they might be able to relate to, and show ways that we are going to be able to showcase them once they become midshipmen and participate in Navy athletics.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. All right. So I'll tell you what, this is going to take us to the end of this segment. We're going to come back shortly. And when we do, we're just going to ask Mary a few more questions to kind of get to know her a little bit better. So stay with us. All right, welcome back to Navy Sports Central. Carl Darden here with you, and we are with Mary McElroy, and I knew her as Mary Miles when she was in my company at the Naval Academy, but she is now the Senior Associate Commissioner for Women's Basketball for the Atlantic Coast Conference. And Mary, it's been great having you share your perspective on college athletics up to this point. Right now, before we continue, I just wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about things that are going on in your life there in Greensboro, and if you have any kind of causes or charities that are important to you, feel free to talk on those. So fire away.
No problem. So I've been in Greensboro now. This is my third year and have had 3 very distinctive years thanks to COVID. But really enjoy living here and have engaged in the community. I'm on a couple of boards. I'm on the Truist Community Advisory Board, where I work with one of the guys on the board is a head of a YMCA. In fact, I've gotten to be pretty good friends with the president and CEO of the Y here in Greensboro. So I try to get involved with them. And they have a back to school program where various people can help basically stock a backpack for a particular student or multiple students. So I try to do that. I try to get over to the Greensboro Urban Mission to a couple of times a month to just pack boxes for families. And then even the ACC office, we engage in community service as a staff at least once a quarter. So we've engaged in helping to spruce up the outdoor facilities at one organization. We actually moved. This one woman had it's like a pantry for underprivileged families, and we literally moved her from one location to the next. Okay. But really just try to stay involved in the communities. I get involved wherever I find myself planted. Yeah.
I think that's a big thing, because I know that when I was working with J&J, I was traveling so much that even after I was a sales manager for a while, and then when I decided to step away from J&J and kind of start working on my own, I realized, wow, I'd been living here for like 11 years. And I hadn't really had a chance to get ties into the community because I was gone all the time. I was on a plane basically 4 days a week. So that was a real challenge for me as well. So I commend you for just wanting to being able to do that as soon as you get to wherever you've moved to geographically. So good stuff.
And someday I'll find a softball team.
All right. So now we're just going to I'm just going to start tossing some questions at you. And these are just more, in some ways, lighthearted, just to kind of get people to know you a little bit better. So let's start off with, again, your current position. What is the most rewarding aspect of your job right now?
I think we hit on it earlier. That is getting to go to all these games. It is so much fun, and getting paid to do it. And then I call. Usually I give them advance notice that I'm coming, and I don't get in their business. I will check in with the coach pregame. In fact, I'll wait till they come on the court, and I'll just go stand by them at their bench and just say hello, and then I go disappear. But the school, I usually give the school that I'm visiting a heads up, and they'll either assign me a seat at the courtside at the table, or they'll let me sit wherever I want to sit. But they treat me like a VIP. I get to go and get the media meal and the whole deal. Get special parking. I have a credential. ACC credential that gets me into all of our schools. Right. But it's pretty nice, and just to be able to walk around the place like I own it. And
it's pretty cool.
I don't though, I usually I'm pretty low key. But getting to go to the games by far is the most rewarding aspect of my job.
All right. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the women's game and the men's game, okay? I watch both a fair amount. Certainly in a tournament, I'm watching them all the time. Name one thing about the women's college game that you like better than the men's game right now.
The fact that we're on quarters. I think it breaks up the game better. And then we have to not only are on quarters, but we also, the way we do our fouls, once you get to 5 fouls, the other team gets to shoot 2 free throws every time. No more 1-and-1 in the women's game. And so you have to be strategic about how you use those fouls. And sometimes you want to go ahead and get to 5 so that the team is forced, if they're not a good free throw shooter, then you're fouling them and putting them on the free throw line and they're missing. But if they're good free throw shooters, you want to be very careful to not get them to five fouls. And then at the another rule is advancing the ball. You can call timeout toward the end of the game. You can call timeout to advance the ball into the forecourt. So those three aspects I like much better about the women's game.
Right. Okay. All right, cool. So, and by the way, I was reading an article by Jay Billis on ESPN.com a little while ago, and he likes that foul situation as well. So, you're in pretty good company there.
Yeah. And the advancing the ball too. I heard him say that.
He said that too. That's right. Okay, now let's flip it. All right. What part of the men's game do you like that you maybe would like to see incorporated on the women's side, if any?
And interestingly enough, you bringing up Jay Billis, I remember him recently talking about the physicality of the men's game. Some people like that the refs let the games be physical, and a couple of our women's coaches want us to allow that. I don't like that. So while, like I said, I do want to acknowledge that some people want the women's game to be allowed to be more physical. I'm of the mind, like Jay Billis, he actually was saying that he thinks that it's gone too far, that they really are too physical. So that's where I am there.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think that there was a lot of contact that I was watching, especially during the tournament, that probably you wouldn't have seen a little while back. So now specifically, if you look at...
It's going to get somebody hurt.
Exactly. So now, is there any particular part of the men's game that you do like, that you would like to see incorporated on the women's side? And it could be anything as innocuous as the dimensions of the court or, something like that.
No, the dimensions of the court, ironically, are the same. It's the ball sizes that are different. The women have gone to a smaller ball.
Right.
We went to that ball when I was playing. In fact, it was during our playing season or during the year, because I think plebe year, it must have been youngster year, because plebe year we played with the big ball and we went to the smaller ball youngster year, and we had to get used to it. And I have big hands. My husband jokes that I have man hands, but I still found the smaller ball harder to play with. But anyway, so I would say, I sometimes I like the halves in the men's game. I like that that's a distinct difference between the men's and women's game, although I think it will change at some point, because they're the last. Men's college basketball, is the only one that doesn't play quarters.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. Now I will throw in my 2 cents now. And when it comes to the men's game itself, and this is not necessarily something from the women's game I wanted to incorporate on the men's side, but just a men's change. And I think even Jay Billis might have mentioned this as well, is to widen that key and keep the same 3 seconds, but widen the key.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that would work out pretty well. And certainly the court dimensions in general are the same for both men and women, but help me out on the 3-point line. Is that
just moved
different?
back. Yeah,
okay.
No, the women, this year was the first year that we shoot from the same line now.
Okay, I knew it was the same as international, which I guess is the same as collegiate. Okay, so that's cool.
Yeah.
They both
so
shoot
it
from the
really
same.
distinguishes the true 3-point shooters now from the ones that just got lucky and hit it when the women's line was a little closer in.
Right. Do you remember a long time ago where there's actually the top of the line was actually inside the key?
Yes,
about like 3 inches.
Yes.
It's like, what's all that about?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you may have alluded to it earlier, but best college game you've ever seen?
Yes, by far, this NC State UConn women's basketball this year. And then men, Duke versus Carolina in the semifinal. Both of those games were outstanding.
Yeah.
It was like, wow, you just, that typical line that you hear people utter. You didn't want to see anybody come away as a loser, but both of those were outstanding games. I was on the edge of my seat for both.
Yeah, I saw both of those, and I kind of, when it comes to ACC, I tend to follow Duke a little bit more, only because my godchild is a graduate from Duke.
Neat.
Yeah, I had a Navy buddy who was an '83 grad from Duke, and he had a daughter. She must be maybe 29 now, I guess. But yeah, she went to Duke, so I follow them pretty closely. And you're right. I mean, even though they wound up on the wrong end of that was a great game and just really, really fun to watch. So
yeah. Both of them. Instant classics.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Favorite player to watch, whether they are in college or as a professional?
David Robinson. I always loved watching David play. I mean, and to know that he didn't start playing basketball till his junior year in high school made it all the more phenomenal. And then watching him and Tim Duncan both play for the Spurs was wonderful. I mean, I just love him as a person, love him as a player, but love him more as a person. So very cool. And Dawn Staley on the women's side, she's a phenomenal player too. I mean, I really enjoy watching her. Did enjoy watching her play, and I'm just so happy for her as a coach.
Yeah, she's really making a name for herself as a coach for sure.
For sure.
That's 2 for her, right? 2 championships.
Yeah, that's the second one.
Yeah. Okay, now we'll go most memorable game you played at Navy.
I really can't think of anyone for me that stood out. Playing. I mean, they were all special because, I mean, I got to play. I was a walk-on. I wasn't expecting to play. And my youngster year, I was the 6th man. So I was the first sub off the bench. So I was like, whoo, look at this is awesome. So, but no, I just enjoyed playing and just enjoyed being on the team, the friendships that I made on the team. You know, it was just phenomenal. I just really loved it.
Right.
So, and one that I remember, though, being on watch, I was the B mod, is that? Yes. Anyway, I was battalion officer of the day or something. No, it was B mod, that battalion midshipman officer of the day. And I ended up walking over to Halsey, and our men's team was playing William and Mary, and that was the game. And I just got the tail end of the game. Luckily, I just happened to walk in the gym and got to see David hit the shot from half court that sent the team to the postseason. So that was was phenomenal to be able to see that.
Yeah. Okay. Fun. And then actually, I'm going to stretch this to any sport, not necessarily basketball. Okay, since you're a 3-sport person. Okay, so. Funniest thing you've ever seen in any game you've played, even if you go back to high school.
Oh my gosh. Funniest? I should have done some more research on this one because I can't really think of anything funny besides an own goal, you know, because it's like, especially in high school. I mean, it happens less in college, but definitely happens more in high school when you're so confused and you very easily can get disoriented and put the ball in your own basket and score for the other team, you know. Luckily, anytime it happened, and I think I did it once, but luckily it didn't cause the other team to win because otherwise my team would have had my neck. But yeah, just scoring an own goal. So
okay, all right, got it. Yeah, in fact, in the junior high game I was watching last week, I saw that happen. Yeah. Poor kid, you know, he's just like, and he's one of these guys that he needed to kind of get that first basket. He needed to see it go in to kind of relax. And it was his first basket of the year. And as soon as I saw what was happening, I'm like kind of screaming from the stands, "No, don't do it!" And it went down. I felt so bad for him afterwards. But again, it didn't matter in the outcome. Yeah. They ended up winning by a mile.
Yeah, so. There was one thing I just realized that I don't know if you can characterize this as funny, but so when I first started playing volleyball, I played JV. My junior year, I was on JV. And that was back when you scored 15. You only scored when you served and went to 15 points. Well, I served a complete game to 15 points.
Is that right?
Yep.
That's 15 straight,
So I served 7 straight points. The other team called timeout to try to ice me, and then I served 8 more.
All right, well, that's a good one. Yeah. Not too many people can do that.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So we're going to break away from sports here for a second.
Sure.
I'm kind of a big movie guy too, so I'm always curious to find out what people's favorite movie category is and what their favorite movie is within that category.
I am such a sports junkie that I love sports
Uh-huh.
dramas. And so that would be my category, sports drama. Although I do
Uh-huh.
love a good rom-com.
So there's sports drama. Okay, so within that category, what do you like?
uh, Remember the Titans. Remember
Okay,
the Titans. That is by far
good choice.
my favorite movie. I mean, it also has Denzel Washington, my favorite male
Hmm.
actor. And and that's one of the few movies though that Denzel's in where I don't get to see that walk. I love his walk. So
Right.
so yeah, so a little bit about me. So well, crazy, crazy
Right,
old
right.
Mary. She's crazy about Denzel Washington.
Yeah, we have that movie on DVD, and I really enjoy it too.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
and every time that's one of those movies that every time it comes on, I'm
Yep.
stopping for at least 20-25
Yep.
minutes, to check it out.
Us
So
too.
good
Yep.
stuff.
We love
All
it.
right. Okay, so last question. One thing you want to share that most people don't know about you.
Probably that I'm a softball player, and
Okay.
that softball is my first love and my primary sport. Um, I'm happy to say that I'm 58 years old and I still play.
Oh,
And
excellent.
people don't really have an idea of how old I am when I'm on the softball field because I don't play like a 58-year-old. I play like a 25-year-old. I'm very
Right.
competitive. I want to win, and I get mad if people are slacking off or whatever. But yeah,
It's like Mary relax. This is
yep,
like
Mary's
a picnic.
she's a
Okay.
mean softball player. So be it women's, I play on women's teams. I play on co-ed. I mean, gosh, when I was up at Temple, my husband was working in Chicago, so I was
Hmm.
up at Temple by myself. And so when I wasn't at Temple sporting events, I was on the softball field, and I would go to that softball field, and teams were always short women. So,
Hmm.
I'd play and then I'd stay and see if the team behind me was short women. And most of the time they were. I mean, I could play 3 or 4 games back to back to back some days.
Wow.
And I loved it. Loved it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. That's going to take us to the end of our conversation. Mary, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. Just having somebody with your level of expertise who can speak to how college athletics has evolved over the years and where it's going has been just terrific. So thanks very much.
It was my distinct pleasure. Thanks, Carl. I really enjoyed it as well. Go Navy!
All right, thanks. That was Mary McElroy, U.S. Naval Academy class of 1987, and the current Senior Associate Commissioner for Women's Basketball in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Okay, I tell you what, we're going to step away for a short break. This is Carl Darden, and you are listening to Navy Sports Central. All right, welcome back, everyone. It is time now for our question of the day. So first, let's go back and check on our responses to the question from our last episode. Remember, we were talking about Keenan Reynolds being the first Navy starting quarterback in history to go 4-0 against Army. And my question to all of you was, how many other Navy starting quarterbacks have beaten the Black Knights at least twice without a loss in the last 20 years? Was it 0, 1, 2, or 3? And the answer that got the most votes was 2. There were 10 of you that went with that choice. Another 3 of you chose 3 starting quarterbacks. And finally, there were 2 others that went with 1. So just to kind of cut straight to the chase here, the correct answer is 3. Those would be Ricky Dobbs, Kaipo Noah, Kayaku Inhada, and also Craig Candido. So let me go ahead and break that down for you a little bit. Dobbs was the Navy starting quarterback in 2009 and 2010, and he led the Mids to wins over Army in both of those years by scores of 17-3 and 31-17. In 2006, sophomore Kaipo Noah Kayaku Inhada took over for an injured Brian Hampton in the middle of the year, and with him under center, Navy won 3 times by a combined score of 98-17. And then finally, Candido was actually a sophomore in 2001, and he did play in that game, which the Mids lost. And by the way, that technically was outside the 20-year window anyway by just 1 year. But anyway, Brian Madden started that game in 2001, not Candido. He did get in right at the end, though, but the outcome had been pretty much decided. So the next year was Coach Johnson's first season, and Candido earned the starting job as a junior, and he was 2-0 as a starter versus Army, winning 58-12 and 34-6. So those are your three Navy quarterbacks who won at least 2 games without a loss to Army. Congratulations to Jordan Thomas and my 2 classmates, Joe Arnoso and Paul Barr, for coming up with the right answer. Now, let's get to today's question. And it's similar to the one I asked Mary McElroy earlier in the show. All right, here goes. Which one of these changes would you like to see implemented in men's college basketball in the next few years? 1, going from 2 halves to 4 quarters to align with the NBA, WNBA, and NCAA women's basketball. 2, eliminating the 1-and-1 and going straight to 2 free throws on the 6-team foul. 3, widening the key from 12 feet to 16 feet, which would match the NBA, and that would create more spacing and allow for more movement. And then finally, 4, advancing the ball to half court in the last 2 minutes of the game after a timeout. You can think about those for a while and leave your answer on the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page. I should have that question up by the end of the day. Okay, now we'll go ahead and wrap things up with our mid-watch segment. Reagan Roloffs continues to be a constant headache for everybody that Navy plays. In the 13-9 win over Holy Cross, she had 3 goals and won 10 controlled draws. I actually watched some of that game, and Roloffs has both really great reflexes and excellent technique when she wins those draws. And you're not going to lose too many when you got those 2 things going for you. She is practically a lock to finish with over 100 controlled draws. Right now, she's got 82 with 3 games left, plus the Patriot League tournament. Roloffs also has 36 goals and 13 assists, both of which are a team best. Now, with Patrick Skalniak, there isn't a whole lot to report. The men's lacrosse team has only played 1 game since the last podcast. Skalniak didn't have a goal in that win over Lafayette, which the Mids took 9-5, but he did pick up an assist when he found an open Dane Swanson, who took the pass and scored his 15th goal of the season. Skalniak has 22 goals and 17 assists on the year for a team leading 39 points. Teams do seem to be keying on him a little bit more, so we will see what kind of adjustments the Mids make when they play Army this weekend. That's going to do it for this edition of Navy Sports Central. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, if you like what you've heard, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and remember to spread the word to all the other Navy fans out there. I'd like to say thanks again to my guest, Mary McElroy from the U.S. Naval Academy's class of 87. Really appreciate her sharing her insights on the current state of college athletics and where it could be headed in the future. We have been getting a great response to our question of the day, so if you want to jump in on that, just go to the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page. I will go ahead and pin it to the top so you won't miss it. And just a quick reminder, the views expressed on Navy Sports Central are my own and do not reflect those of the U.S. Naval Academy or Navy Athletics. By the way, the music used in Navy Sports Central comes to you courtesy of Audio Jungle. This is a great site for purchasing the rights to use music from thousands of artists around the world, and those we feature in the podcast will be credited in our show notes. Talk to you soon, everybody. Until next time, this is Carl Darden. Go Navy, beat Army.